Now, I've been getting a bit frustrated when the commentary on Talkback is, where are the jobs coming from? Where is the money coming from to fix our economy? Well, of course, we are a trading nation. Now, if negotiations beginning this week are successful, New Zealand's economic relationship with the United Kingdom could be returned to something TradeWorks blog is describing as open and dynamic, if not completely like things were dimly remembered in the past. From the New Zealand International Business Forum, joining us now is Executive Director Stephen Jacobi. How has the appetite for New Zealand's food and fibre been in the UK in recent weeks, Stephen, compared to other countries as they go back to the drawing board post-Brexit?
Well, kia ora, Sarah. It's good to be with you again. Well, of course, at the moment, one would have to say that consumers' appetites for products are kind of all over the map, really, aren't they, as we're coping with this very difficult situation. It does still remain difficult in Britain, and that's changing a lot of consumption habits, frankly, particularly as people move to dining out in restaurants to having meals at home. But, you know, our trade generally is holding up very well, and so I'm sure it's holding up in Britain as well. But this new stage we're about to go into with Britain, I think, does point to something different for the future. And if it can be brought off successfully, and with trade negotiations, it's always a big if, isn't it? If it can be brought off successfully, could deliver some new value for New Zealand producers.
Of course. And it's interesting, though, that New Zealand's sitting in a favourable position because, of course, the US is banging on their door with things like chlorinated chicken and some things that would question food security at such a time we're experiencing around the world with COVID.
That's right. We're actually in a bit of a long queue, really, because we've got the Britain's negotiating with the European Union, of course. It has to finish its exit arrangements, and then it has to negotiate a new trade relationship with the EU. That's a big one. They're negotiating with the United States, and the United States always comes with complicated things, particularly for a range of products that some consumers might not always appreciate too much. Chlorinated chicken wouldn't be on my top of the list either. But they're also negotiating with Japan and with Australia and with us. So that's a very busy schedule. And I've never really subscribed to the view that, you know, Britain won't be able to do all these things because it doesn't have the experience and all the rest of it. They've actually got a very competent civil service. They've got a very competent chief trade negotiator in the form of Crawford Faulkner from New Zealand.
Oh, God, it sounds like us exporting the All Blacks to play against us.
Take carefully when it comes to the negotiation with us. Well, it probably will. He's a consummate professional, as you would expect. But so, yeah, we're in a bit of a queue, and that could slow things up. The real problem, I think, with this negotiation is not a lack of goodwill or a lack of opportunity. It's just a lot of uncertainty still about the nature of Britain's future relationship with the European Union. Until they've sorted that out, I really wonder if they're going to be in a position to get down to the detail of what is required in a trade negotiation with New Zealand and the other partners.
Will our relationship with the EU and our negotiations with them reflect what in turn we will have with the UK? And that alludes me to the situation I want to discuss with you that we talked to Chris Claridge from Potatoes New Zealand about, is this dumping of potato fries from the Netherlands and the grief it's causing our potato growers at home. That's just one. We can go on for everything, can't we? Milk through to digital rights to everything. The UK, New Zealand stuff still seems like a mess, or are we getting closer to actually some form of understanding of each other?
Well, I think between the UK and New Zealand in this post-Brexit environment, we've actually developed quite a high level of understanding because we've been talking to the British for the last few years about future trade arrangements. We just haven't been able to start the negotiation until it got closer to the time at which Britain would be leaving the EU. So I think Britain knows everything it needs to know about New Zealand, and we know a lot of what we need to know about Britain. What we don't quite know is what new regulations and what have you they're going to be putting in place once they leave the EU definitively. And they're not going to be able to be clear about that until they've finished that process. And remember, the EU, even though they're leaving the European Union, the EU will still be by far their largest market. And so they will want to preserve a lot of the status quo in terms of the way they do business in the EU. They won't be in the business of putting in different things in relation to different things. And that's going to be across the range of things you just mentioned, agriculture, but also digital trade and all the rest of things that revolve around that, particularly around cybersecurity and privacy issues. We won't know what that looks like for some time yet.
Right. So as we stand in the queue, as you've said, that reliance on China seems more and more appealing, Stephen.
Well, Britain's not going to replace China. Let's be quite clear about that. We're not going to, at least not for our core exports of dairy products and meat and horticulture. There's no way you can replace that consumption in Chinese consumption with British consumption or European consumption. You can't replace it anywhere. And so we are going to have to continue to maintain a very strong relationship with China while developing new friendships with the European Union, certainly, and we'll get on to the potatoes issue in a minute, but also with the UK post-Brexit.
Has our government got a little appetite for putting up a fight with the WTO when it comes to this dumping of fries in New Zealand, because everything's walking on eggshells at the moment with our general trade negotiations?
Well, let's put it this way. No industry should have to put up with unfair competition, whether through dumping or price manipulation or through subsidisation. And there are processes that we have and remedies that we have available to combat that sort of thing. And these remedies are enshrined in the WTO, and they're included in our trade agreements, which set out the processes to be followed. And so what the New Zealand industry has done is, believing that it's facing dumping from producers in the European Union, it has initiated those procedures, as it is perfectly their right to do. But the burden of proof is quite high, because you not only have to prove that the price manipulation has occurred, you also have to prove that it has caused material injury to your industry. And that is not always as straightforward to prove as it might seem. A lot of people have, from time to time, problems with the way we administer our trade remedies. Talk to the steel producers, for example. But here's the thing. We have to keep to the rules. We have to stick to the agreed processes, because we don't want to face illegitimate trade actions in other economies either. So the more we keep to the rules, the more other people will keep to the rules. But if the industry feels there's a case to answer, it needs to make the case, and the government needs to look into it.
Stephen, I'm going to sneak in one last question, because I know that we're going to cut very shortly to Guy Peacock to close. But does the same apply for the Chinese stockpiling and manipulating the commodity price?
Well, I'm not quite sure what...
in regards to, say, for instance, wool or any of our products where they go on a big buying spree to fluctuate the price.
Again, there are behaviours that are more related to commercial arrangements between partners, and there are behaviours that are related to the actions of governments. And governments are constrained by rules. China's government is constrained by rules, and if there is an issue to be answered in relation to wool, for example, then we will have to point out what that is and prove that there's been some impairment of those rules. But if we don't keep to the rules, if we just decide to go and do our own thing, whether on chips or wool or whatever, we are going to face a harder road to hoe when it comes to our products going into third markets. And we don't want to see that, particularly not at this time when the products of our fine agricultural industry are what are propping up our economy.
Oh, goodness gracious. It's a hard role being as the small guy at the bottom of the world sometimes, Stephen. But
that's right. That's right. That's why we need the rules, of course. But yeah, sure, it sure is.
Yeah.
But all credit to our farmers for doing what they need to do and, as I say, keeping us afloat.
Oh, thank you so much. Always enjoy your time. Stephen Jacobi, trade commentator there, and of course representing the New Zealand International Business Forum.
This is Sarah's Country.